This is the professor's discussion for Chapter 4, which is about franchises and buyouts. In our previous discussions, recall that we've talked about starting a business from scratch, but there are two other options. And so in this chapter, we're now going to turn our attention to the other two methods of start. So one of the business concepts that we've generated at our class so far, think about this for a minute, and are there any that could be franchise opportunities? Many of them have existing franchise model opportunities, and one of the things we may want to consider when planning our startup is to consider maybe buying into the franchise system versus starting one from scratch. The franchise is a business model. It's a way that we do business. We purchase the rights to conduct that business according to the terms specified in the agreement. These are licensed trademarks, and these are methods to that independent entrepreneur. And when we purchase that right, it is the legal relationship between two different parties. In this relationship are first the franchisor. The franchisor is the owner that provides the business expertise that sells the name and the system. Next is the franchisee. The franchisee is who sells the system, or who buys a license into the system and buys that name. They bring their entrepreneurial spirit, and they do this on behalf of the franchisor. The contract is the legal document. It's a document that contains all of the conditions of the relationship and meets all the requirements of a contract, as we've learned in our business law classes, that contains all of the agreements between the franchisor and the franchisee. The franchise itself are the rights or the license to conduct business. Now, when we think of franchises, we typically think of restaurants, and I think I've already shown you an example of a very popular restaurant franchise, which is Subway. However, there are different types of franchising. First, there's what you see on the left-hand side, which is a product or trade name type of franchise agreement. Here, the franchisee has the right to use the name, but actually buys the inventory and conducts their business in a little bit more of an independent manner than what we consider to be a business format franchise. The business format franchise provides services such as marketing, management, and operations. And it is the most popular by far, and like I said, concentrated in the restaurant industry, but it is becoming more popular in other industries such as services, cleaning, fitness, and tax preparation, and even hotels. So we're seeing the business format franchise becoming a little bit more diversified. Franchising is a highly specialized regulated field by the Federal Trade Commission, and it's represented by a pretty powerful industry association that you see here, which is called the International Franchise Association. The IFA sets standards and represents the interests of both franchisors and franchisees. And the reason why is because franchising has a pretty large economic impact in the U.S. business system. There are over 750,000 establishments, which provide over 8.2 million jobs per year and contribute over $470 billion in terms of gross domestic product. So its economic impact is large. You can see here a list of the franchises, the top franchises in 2014, and this sort of gets to our point of the fact that franchising is becoming a little bit more diversified, and it's not limited to just the restaurant industry. Here we see examples of businesses that have a very franchisable model, such as ServPro, which is a cleaning business, Supercuts, which is hair cutting, Hampton Hotels, which obviously is a haircut, which is obviously a hotel business, and Anytime Fitness, which is a fitness establishment. When we buy into the franchising model, we do so because we see very clear advantages, and you can see these here in the picture on your screen. First and foremost is the probability of success. In most cases, when we buy into a franchise system, we're buying into a model that's been established and proven, and somebody's done all of the hard work for us. They've determined our location, they've determined the menu, they've determined the pricing, they've determined the marketing approach. And so we've done that. The next is the fact that it's well known, and that leads to the probability of success. Some of the most recognizable logos on the planet, such as McDonald's, are indeed franchise systems. We get things like a proven operating plan. We get access to training. We get financial and even lending support. And we enjoy economies of scale because we're able to buy our raw materials along with all of the other franchisees, and that provides us price discounts. Advantages come very distinct risks. And during the recession, we saw this in quite a few of the more popular franchises in the restaurant industry. Franchises don't always give us clear financial data. They mislead us in terms of the financial opportunities, and that actually happened with Quiznos. They actually had refusal to sell clauses in their contracts, meaning that franchisees could literally not sell their franchise locations for a specified period of time, and they forced franchisees to buy raw materials from suppliers that benefited the corporate office. Encroachment is another type of risk. Encroachment is where the franchisor sells too many licenses in one geographic area, and that is a risk to the competitive environment. That happened with Cold Stone Creamery before the recession. They set up too many licenses in one geographic area, and customers were visiting multiple locations. The franchisee owners felt that their territory was being encroached upon by the corporate office. Probably the largest risk or downside to franchising is from a management perspective. There really isn't a lot of freedom in how you manage your business. You're forced to carry certain menu items at certain prices and make sure that you promote them in certain ways. Moreover, franchisors often force changes to businesses. The UPS store is a good example of this. Many of the franchisees were carryovers from the old mailboxes, etc. franchise system, and the UPS store made them spend their own money, which was pretty substantial in the millions of dollars, in order to conduct physical upgrades to their locations. Next one is the cost. When you buy into a franchise system, you are paying for the privilege of running a location of in one of these companies. And so you can see here the typical costs for an Anytime Fitness. The initial fee doesn't really seem all that unreasonable. It's listed at $32,500. You can see the total investment costs are much more than that. The initial fee represents only about 10% of the initial investment costs, and as you can guess, the remainder of those costs go to building out the location. In the case of Anytime Fitness, the royalties are actually quite different. Most companies charge royalties based on a percentage of sales. Anytime Fitness chooses to charge royalties of a flat fee per month. Moreover, you have to pay another 2% of your sales revenue to support the advertising costs of the entire corporation. Buying into a franchise is a very complicated, time-consuming process in an industry that is still filled with opportunistic individuals, and that presents a lot of opportunities for scams. The IFA produces a guide called the Franchise Opportunities Guide, and it's one of the only official guides to franchising in the system. It gives potential franchisees numerous pointers and steps to go through the franchising process. When we evaluate a franchise, this is considering a number of legal issues. There really is no other way than to hire the services of an attorney who specializes in franchise agreements in order to help you evaluate the franchise document. A friend of mine who considered buying into a UPS store franchise received a 500-page legal document which outlined every last detail of the franchise agreement. Surely he needed legal help in reviewing that document. Before we sign the contract, we want to make sure that we take a look at the franchise disclosure document, which is a listing of the company's history in terms of its lawsuits, its financial performance, and its growth projections. That way we can get, from a seller's perspective, hopefully full disclosure in terms of the risks that we are buying into and the opportunities that present itself in the future. We can also buy an existing business not part of a franchise operation. A friend of mine who owns a lawn care company decided that he wanted to expand his business. He had one option, which was really conducting marketing activities to gain potential consumers one by one to add to his lawn cutting business. Instead, what he decided to do was he decided to buy an existing business that was up for sale. He did that because he saw a lot of advantages to buying this business. He was acquiring an established relationship between the firm and its customers, which gave him a quick start to building his business. In other words, he didn't have to wait and work the months of footwork in getting his customers one by one. He bought an existing book of business. This helped potentially reduce the uncertainty of his business, and he was actually able to negotiate a very fair price for business. When we buy an existing business, we will go through a process called due diligence. And as you can see here, it's a pretty long list of just the different categories of information that we need to consider when we buy an existing book of business. Here we want to investigate why the business is for sale, and much like other types of purchases that we make, such as cars and homes, we really want to understand what we're getting ourselves into. There's no question that we will use the services of business brokers, attorneys, and accountants in this due diligence process.